How dare you serve him before me?
How dare you serve that old man before me? You people never know where you stand. The words cut through the air like glass that had been broken. As soon as they left Claudia Langford's lips, the whole kitchen stopped. Pots clanked, steam hissed, and for one horrible second, time stopped. Under the golden chandeliers and the sound of luxury, something sinister was brewing that smelled like hate, privilege, and dread. Autumn Greer stood there, her hands shaking as she held a silver tray. The smell of truffle butter blended with the harsh smoke that came from the oil on the burner. Her maid's cap was precisely straight, and her rich dark complexion shone under the heat lamps. She had only been working for 3 days, but she was already learning what people said behind closed doors, the unspoken rules of serving the privileged while having the wrong skin color. "Mrs. Langford," she whispered gently, her voice steady but serene. "Your father hasn't eaten all day. He has diabetes. I was just—" "That's enough," Claudia yelled. "Stop it," and slammed her diamond-covered hand against the marble counter. "You think you can tell me what to do? In my own house?" The people who worked in the kitchen turned to stone. Nobody wanted to move. There was so much tension in the air that it was hard to breathe. Claudia moved closer, and the silk robe she was wearing whispered on the floor. "People like you should remember why they were hired. To obey, not to think." Autumn's heart raced, but she didn't look away. There was something cutting and menacing behind those warm eyes. She smiled a little, as if she were too calm. "With all due respect, ma'am," she remarked, "I didn't come here just to serve." For a moment, the only sound was the frying pan crackling. Then Claudia's rage boiled over. She picked up the pan, which was hot and spitting oil, and threw it at Autumn. The scream that came after it echoed through the mansion's marble halls like a curse that couldn't be broken. The Langford estate, which was famous for its wealth, art, and power, suddenly became a crime scene. But no one realized that this was never just another case of cruelty. This was a black story that would break the illusion of privilege and show that money can't buy virtue. You're watching Hidden Worth, where every truth that power tries to hide eventually comes to light. Stay with me. You should find out what happens next. They named her Autumn Greer in the fall. To the Langfords, she was just another helper, a young black girl with a sweet smile and calm eyes, who had been employed by a staffing agency to refill water glasses and deliver trays. But the truth behind that uniform was much more difficult, dangerous, and powerful than anyone in that marble-covered palace could ever have thought. Autumn Greer was 24 years old and grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Her beauty was the kind that didn't scream for attention, it murmured. Her skin was smooth and radiant, like dark mahogany, and her smile could light up a dark room. She moved, stood, and looked with grace. But it wasn't her looks that made her stand out. Her mind was what it was. She was the best in her class in behavioral forensics, recruited right into a secret part of the Federal Bureau of Criminal Integrity that only a few individuals in Washington know about. She looked like a ghost, a whisper in strong ears. But what about this mission? This one was not the same. This one was close to home. 6 months ago, her younger brother Elijah, who was smart, driven, and only 22 years old, went missing. The last time anyone saw him, he was coming inside Langford Tech's East Campus for an internship interview. No calls, no records, no need for police. She remembered what the police officer told her when she made the report. Maybe he just got too much to handle. These youngsters go away for a while. He'll show up. But Elijah never did. Autumn was the person who knew her brother best. He was careful, concentrated. He didn't just go away. Someone made him go away. And that person was hiding behind expensive automobiles, donations to hedge funds, and charity galas. She really delved deep. Links, whispers, and at the heart of it all was Victor Langford's billion-dollar business. Autumn didn't wait for her assignment when the Bureau began an unofficial case about possible human trafficking and money laundering linked to Langford Holdings. She offered to help. She told me to give her the maid's uniform. I'll use the service door to get in. The Langfords thought she was invisible, but Autumn Greer knew that invisibility could be a weapon if you knew how to utilize it. She knew what she had to do. Come close, get proof, learn what happened to Elijah. When they told her to clean toilets, she smiled. When they called her names, She graciously nodded, and when Claudia Langford poured oil on her, she thought she was just another nobody. Autumn didn't break. She was ready for the torture. Because this wasn't simply about doing the right thing. This was about taking down an empire, one falsehood at a time. The Langford mansion looked like a crown made of marble and glass on the cliffs of Lake Washington. People thought it was a sign of success because it was a modern-day palace owned by one of the richest families on the West Coast. In its magnificent hall, politicians had shaken hands. Under its crystal chandeliers, famous people had champagne toasts. The press dubbed it a work of art in architecture. But for Autumn Greer, it was something else. It was a stronghold, a golden prison with rot behind its walls. The crew called it the Ice House, not because of the climate control, but because of Claudia Langford. The lady of the house went around the rooms like a queen without a court. Every step she took required stillness, deference, and distance. She didn't say anything. She spoke. Autumn had worked in enough rich people's homes to know the difference between power and money. Money bought things. People were controlled by power. And Claudia Langford has both. Autumn had already felt what it was like to be invisible in the worst way for 3 days before the oil event. No one ever called her by name, just her, or worse, it. People gave her tasks as punishment, like scrubbing the marble floor with a toothbrush, polishing every silver fork before breakfast, and carrying 20-pound platters up 3 flights of stairs without hitting the railings. One mistake, and the chief butler, Mr. Finch, would smile at her like that. The sort that said, "There are cameras watching. Don't cause trouble." Other staff members didn't talk much. There was fear in their eyes. "Don't look her in the eye," a young cook from Tucson said to Autumn once, behind the pantry door. For all time. Claudia thought of the workers like furniture, useful when needed and easy to get rid of when not. And what if you were black? You were invisible until you did something wrong. You were the error after that. The East Wing was not open to Autumn. She wasn't supposed to ask questions. She was supposed to serve, smile, and then leave. But she was paying attention. In every hallway. All of the key codes. Every door that needed a fingerprint. And she saw something else. Claudia spent a lot of time in the wine cellar, but she never brought any wine back. Packages came at strange times and were just signed with initials. And what about the security system? It was better than some government structures. This wasn't just a house. It was a cover, a stage, a lie that has been practiced a lot. And Autumn understood that to bring it all down, she would have to play her part precisely, at least until the mask broke. There are always cracks. No matter how smooth the surface or how much the marble costs, the truth will come out eventually. Autumn Greer has seen it happen before. Places of worship, courtrooms, companies. The Langford estate was the same. It began little, not obvious. As soon as she walked into the room, the talk stopped. A passageway that looked to be watched all the time, even when no one was there. A door in the West Wing that was locked and wasn't shown on any blueprints. The longer Autumn stayed in the mansion, the more she understood that it wasn't just a house. It was an illusion that had been painstakingly planned out, with every detail meant to impress and distract. Every morning, she watched Claudia glide down the stairs like a bad guy in a movie. She wore a silk robe and blood-red lipstick. The coffee was already heating on the table when she got there. Every action was timed, every syllable practiced, and every time her father-in-law, Judge Harold Langford, came into the room, there was the same chilly quiet. That was the most important thing. People acted like Judge Langford, the true father, wasn't there. He used to be one of the most powerful men in Seattle, but now people just saw him as a bother. His meals were late. His prescription was misplaced. And no one ever asked why he was stuck in the East Parlor, where he was seldom ever visited or fed. Autumn saw, and she paid attention. Then there was a whisper. One night, as Autumn was cleaning the corridor outside the wine cellar, she heard Claudia talking to Rhodes, the chief of security. "Get the room ready," Claudia ordered in a harsh voice. "The guest tonight is from Shanghai." "No names, no records. Do you get what I'm saying?" Rhodes nodded in response, which she could hear more than see. "Yes, ma'am. Tunnels are clear." Tunnels? Autumn's heart raced. That made sense of the extra guards by the garden wall. That made sense of the big cargoes that came in at 3 a.m., labeled as artifacts. She had previously put 2 audio bugs in place, one behind the fireplace in the dining room, and the other inside a damaged lamp base in Claudia's office. But this was more than stealing money, more than blackmail. This was trafficking. That night, she passed past the East Wing and noticed the judge looking out the window like a guy who was yelling but couldn't hear. Autumn stopped for a while and nodded. She saw you, Judge. She witnessed everything. The Langfords put up walls to keep outsiders out. But they forgot that cracks go both ways. And Autumn was already getting away. Autumn could sense it in her eyes before she could prove it, looking. Not only Claudia's normal skepticism or the staff's hushed looks. No, this was not the same. More sharp, more weighty. It seemed like something chilly was pressing across her shoulder blades every time she moved around the mansion. At first, she felt her nerves were just messing with her. The persistent stress of having to stay hidden, the emotional burden of her brother's absence. But eventually the indications got too clear to ignore. Someone had moved her work cart one morning. Not by much, only a few inches off the tile she normally left it on. A gentle warning. That same day, someone had left her personal locker open. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disrupted. There was only one white envelope on the top shelf, and it was absolutely empty. No note, nothing except emptiness. She didn't touch it. She didn't have to. It was a sign. They know you're not who you say you are. That's when Autumn changed the rules. She stopped putting devices in apparent areas and started placing them where only someone who was very nervous would look, behind loose molding, behind empty electrical sockets, and even under the carriage bolts on the floor of the dumbwaiter. She would give them a game of shadows if they asked for one. But Claudia Langford was not new to psychological warfare. The next morning, Autumn was given a new job, to provide a private brunch for Claudia's guests. At first, it didn't seem dangerous. But the real test was when Claudia herself stood 2 feet away, sipping orange juice, and watched her set up the table. Claudia asked, "Do you ever wonder how long people like you last in houses like this?" Autumn didn't look up. She put the linen napkin down with flawless accuracy. Claudia leaned closer and spoke in a softer, almost pleasant voice. "You believe that by fitting in, you'll be safe? It won't. I can smell ambition like something that is rotting." Autumn turned just enough to look her in the eyes. "Ma'am, I'm here to help. That's all." Claudia's smile didn't reach her eyes. That was what the last one said, before she disappeared. The words were like poison in the air. Autumn didn't move, but her heart raced like thunder within. At that point, she realized Claudia was testing her. Not simply her loyalty, but also her breaking point. Autumn had no plans to break. She had entered this house as a shadow. But now, the attention was slowly shifting to her. People were watching every step. Every breath was recorded. The Langfords were going around in circles. But they didn't know that she was too. It happened by chance. Autumn told herself that, at least, staff normally weren't allowed on the 3rd floor of the Langford estate. A wing set aside for executive guests, although no people had been spotted going in for weeks. But when someone requested Autumn to bring a tea tray to the study, she spotted her chance. The hallway was quiet, and the thick carpet made her footsteps sound like they were gone. The air smelled like cedar and antique books. She stopped in front of the last door on the left, which was the only one that didn't have a nameplate. It was open. The area was dark inside and filled with glass exhibits and taxidermy, which made it look like a sick monument to power and decay. In the middle of the room was a desk with black leather on top and papers placed with surgical perfection. She didn't have a lot of time. She put the tray down, tightened her gloves, and moved. The top drawer was locked, of course, but the second one wasn't. There were folders inside that were thick, had tabs, and had the Langford Holdings seal on them. Some were checks. Some of them appeared like HR documentation for the company. But her hands didn't start to shake until she opened a folder that said, Foreign Operations L Group. Pictures, names, dates, people. There are dozens of faces, most of whom are young and from minority groups. Each profile had a short bio and a red stamp that said, cleared, pending, or terminated. One face made her pause in her tracks. Greer, Elijah, her brother. There he was, grinning. The same picture he had sent in with his application for an internship. There was a comment next to his image that said, "Overheard Level 2 plans. Move to secure transit." Transit that is safe? Her blood ran cold. She scanned through the pages quickly, looking at the ones that said, Facility E, Client Prep, and Loss Reports. The writing was coded, but she understood what it meant. This wasn't simply taking advantage of people. It was human trafficking. It was planned, organized, and put into spreadsheets and strategy memoranda. The Langfords were at the center of it all. She took pictures of everything, every page and every stamp, and then she spotted the map. A full-scale schematic of an underground facility was pinned to the inside of the cabinet door. It went 3 stories down below the estate and spread out like a spider's web. There was a red dot that blinked at the far edge. It was just marked T3 Holding. Autumn took a step back, breathing shallowly. They weren't just keeping something a secret. They were keeping people. She didn't know how long she had been standing there, her heart racing in her ears. But when she heard footsteps in the hall, she closed the drawer, straightened her clothes, and picked up the tea tray as if nothing had occurred. Her ears were ringing with blood, but her thinking was clear. She had discovered the truth. Now, she had to stay alive long enough to tell everyone about it. It was meant to be simply another night of work. The dining room was full of quiet elegance. Golden chargers shone under bone-white china, and the smell of rosemary lamb and white truffle risotto filled the air. Outside, rain tapped softly against the tall windows, making the world feel like it was holding its breath. Autumn walked like a shadow, her tray balanced easily in her hand. Her uniform was immaculate, and her expression was calm. But within, she was on fire. She had seen and learned too much, and she could feel the walls closing in. She hadn't told the Bureau everything she found yet. The recordings were still being uploaded to the encrypted cloud, but the transfer was slow, and she couldn't risk a full breach until she was off the property. She had planned to stay out of sight tonight. Claudia Langford, on the other hand, had different plans. Claudia was waiting in the kitchen when Autumn came in with a new tray of dishes. Her eyes were keen, and her voice sounded like broken glass. "Why did you serve my father before me?" Autumn blinked. The old guy was shaking in his seat because his blood sugar was dangerously low. She wasn't going to let him go into a diabetic coma just because it was the right thing to do. "He hasn't eaten all day," she said gently. "He's diabetic, ma'am." Claudia's smile was slow and nasty. "You were told? Who told you, sweetheart? Or do you just like to pretend you matter?" The kitchen personnel froze. No one moved. The head chef stopped stirring. A busboy silently withdrew out the door. Autumn didn't flinch. She spoke in a calm, steady tone. "Mrs. Langford, I only wanted to protect someone's health." "Protect?" Claudia's voice got louder. "You're a server. You're nobody. You don't protect. You obey." Then came the time that no one saw coming, at least not so quickly. Claudia picked up the pan. "It's still hot and bubbling." She threw the hot oil across the room without warning. It caught Autumn right in the neck and shoulder. The sound was horrible, a piercing sizzle. Then a muffled scream that came from Autumn's throat as she dropped the tray and staggered back. The sound of metal hitting tile sounded like a gunshot. The chamber smelled like burning flesh as steam curled up into the air. Things became crazy. Someone yelled for help, and the staff cried. A young maid sank to her knees and tried to push cold cloths against Autumn's burning flesh. But all Autumn could do was hold onto the front of her apron, where her last backup chip was buried. She pushed it closer to her chest even though it hurt. She would make sure her truth lived on if this was how it ended. And when her knees gave out and her body hit the tile floor, her mission burned hotter than ever. The fluorescent lights overhead made a dreary, rhythmic noise. Machines next to her beeped gently, evenly, and slowly, counting down the seconds till she died. Autumn Greer was in a hospital bed, covered in gauze and silence. The right side of her face and neck was heavily bandaged, and the skin below was furious and blistering. Morphine muffled the worst of the pain, but nothing could put out the fire in her chest. She was still alive. Barely. The first thing she heard when she woke up was the nurse whispering, "She's stabilizing." The second was the sound of heels clicking, slow and steady. It wasn't hospital staff. Elena Rivers walked into the room like a storm in a suit. She had sharp cheekbones, a black jacket, and eyes like steel. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was Autumn's lawyer. She was also one of the few people in the bureau who understood everything about this assignment. Elena murmured softly, "Autumn," as she pulled a chair up to the bed. "Don't talk yet. Just blink if you can hear me." Autumn blinked once. "We got the audio files," Elena said. "Your devices were in the right place, but the upload stopped halfway through, so we only have partial recordings." Autumn's lips parted. They were dry and cracked. She winced and then said, "Back up." Elena got near. Autumn said, "The chip," in a rough voice. "Apron, inside lining." Elena let out a breath and nodded. "It was still on you when the ambulance got there. We got it back, unharmed." Autumn relaxed a little, and her body sank deeper into the bed, but she wasn't done. "Mark, Jensen," she said in a voice that sounded like sandpaper. Elena frowned. "Your partner?" Autumn nodded slowly and carefully. "He has a second copy. I told him to trust but verify." Elena responded, "I'll call him," and she was already taking out her phone. But Autumn grabbed her wrist. "No, in person, he's scared." There was a long break. Elena asked, "Do you think he's in trouble?" Autumn's eyes stayed open. That was all she needed to know. Elena rose up and said in a calm but forceful voice, "I'll get it. I'll bring it back myself." 2 federal agents stood guard outside the room. Inside, Autumn's fingers slowly curled around the edge of the blanket as her mind began to put together the map of everything she had learned. The estate, the files, and the tunnels. She didn't care how much pain she was in or how long she had to stay in bed. This wasn't the end. This was the start of the storm. And nothing pain, fear, or betrayal was going to stop her now. Mark Sutton told himself he wasn't a bad man. He'd worn the badge, done the job, and worked long nights that no one appreciated him for. For 3 years, he had been Autumn Greer's partner at the bureau, seeing her rise quicker, shine brighter, and earn trust in rooms he could barely get into. She was the face of covert genius. He was dependable, but not very memorable. Up until now. The flash drive was on his desk and was no bigger than a house key. It had the second full backup of Autumn's investigation, which included every video, photo, and detail that might bring the Langford empire to its knees. He looked at it like a person who was about to drown would look at a life raft. Then his phone rang. There was no name, only a message. 1 hour, on the roof, come alone. He recognized the person. Mark didn't need Victor Langford to introduce himself. He had seen the man on magazine covers and lists of powerful people in finance. And now he was offering Mark something he had never been offered before in his career. An escape, a chance to matter. He put the drive in his jacket pocket, looked at his reflection once, same sleepy eyes, same average face, and went up to the roof of the downtown office building. Victor was already there, standing next to a fancy black SUV with his hands behind his back like a CEO looking over the battlefield. Mark walked up gently. "Do you have it?" Victor inquired, his voice cold. Mark nodded. "And I want a clean deal offshore. No way to find it." Victor grinned a little. "Of course, I'm a man of my word." He gave her a phone that already had a transfer screen open. Mark thought for a moment before putting the drive on the SUV's hood. He tapped the screen, and the confirmation blinked. $10 million transferred. Victor picked up the disc and said, "Congratulations, Agent Sutton. You just got rid of a problem." Mark swallowed hard, attempting to calm the guilt that was building up in his chest. "No one gets hurt, right?" Victor's smile faded. "That's not your problem anymore." Mark turned to go, his heart racing, not sure if he had just betrayed his partner or rescued himself. He promised himself Autumn would never know. Autumn Greer, on the other hand, was already feeling the weight of betrayal in a hospital bed across town. And she wouldn't fall for it again. The federal courtroom in downtown Seattle hadn't had this much media attention in years. Cameras lined the steps, and reporters filled the marble hallways like hornets, their mics humming with excitement. The people against Langford Holdings. Autumn Greer was back on the battlefield. She walked slowly but forcefully into the courtroom, wearing a navy blue suit that covered most of her healing burns. Her step was measured, but her presence spoke volumes. She wasn't there for sympathy. She was there for the truth. Victor Langford sat at the defense table, his charcoal suit perfectly polished and his fingers steepled. Claudia sat next to him, her eyes wide but empty. The press had called her the Ice Queen, ever since the hospital video leaked the moment Autumn was wheeled into the ER, still holding the apron chip. Judge Alton Prescott was in charge of the case. His eyes were piercing, and he didn't mess around. The courtroom went quiet as the trial began. The first witness was Autumn. She got up on the stand. No feelings, just facts. She informed them about the house, the locked doors, the images, the files, and the T3 holding zone under the mansion. She also talked about Judge Langford, the true patriarch, who was ignored and hidden. She also talked about Claudia's voice, which was recorded telling staff to prep clients, no records. Then she gave him the drive. The courtroom was silent. When the prosecutor played the audio, it sounded like thunder in a church. Victor said, "Move the Shanghai shipment tonight. We don't want another Greer situation." Claudia said, "That girl is too curious. End it." Autumn didn't even blink. The defense panicked and said it was fake and that it had been edited. But then came the big news. The Bureau's cyber forensics unit proved that the chip was real by checking its digital fingerprints, timestamps that had not been changed, and geotags that matched the estate's internal systems. "Miss Greer, did you have any help?" the judge questioned. Autumn stopped, and the room got tense. "No," she responded. "I had coworkers, but for this mission, I was alone. I couldn't risk being betrayed again." Mark Sutton sat in the gallery. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. He knew what was going to happen. And it was. Truth. Never-ending, unforgiving. And lastly, without a doubt, Victor Langford had spent his whole life creating his business, one lie at a time. He learned how to smile for cameras while silencing adversaries. He bought off senators, threw charity galas, and shook hands with presidents. Power was his language, and secrecy was his religion. But none of that mattered now, because the courtroom had turned into an inferno, and the truth was blazing through the walls. The prosecution brought in fresh evidence, like bank records from offshore accounts, shipping bills that were disguised as tech prototypes, and even face recognition that linked missing people to Langford-owned properties all around the world. The video came next. The video, taken from Claudia's secret monitoring system, showed Victor taking the flash drive from Mark Sutton, who was sending $10 million in real time. When it played, Victor's hands jerked. Claudia leaned back, her mouth open in shock. People in the crowd gasped. "Order, now," the judge said as he threw down his gavel. But the harm was done. Autumn sat still and quiet at the witness table. Her face was blank, but her dark, steady eyes never left Victor's face. He then stared at her. He really looked. And for the first time in his life, Victor Langford knew what it was like to be afraid. Claudia was the first to break. She stood up in the middle of her testimony, shivering. "You said we were safe," she yelled at Victor. "You said it would go away." Victor didn't say anything. Mark Sutton, who was sitting toward the back, put his hands over his face. The prosecutor looked at the judge. "We ask for an immediate arrest, Your Honor, on charges of conspiracy, human trafficking, bribery, and trying to stop justice." "Okay," Judge Prescott said. The bailiffs were quick. Victor didn't fight back. He just bowed his head and said, "I built an empire for nothing." The cuffs made a clicking sound. Claudia cried as they pulled her away, her fancy heels slipping on the smooth floor. There were explosions of cameras outside the courthouse. "Breaking the Langford dynasty falls in historic federal ruling," news anchors said live. As the crowd cleared, Autumn stood still. There was no applause or victory dance. Nothing except quiet. Justice didn't come in a flash of light. It had come like her, slowly, quietly, and without stopping. And the strong had finally lost. 2 weeks later, the world watched in quiet as Autumn Greer came onto the stage of the Federal Justice Hall in Washington, D.C. The auditorium was full of judges, agents, students, and survivors. Everyone who had followed the Langford trial, from the first whisper to the last gavel, had come to see something else. Not the fall of power, but the growth of resilience. Autumn stood erect. The light from the spotlight barely showed the faint lines of burn scars that twisted over her neck and jaw. She didn't hide them. She wore them like medals. The head of the bureau gave her a plaque. "For courage beyond the call of duty," he said, his voice full with pride. "For protecting the voiceless, even when yours was almost taken." The room stood up, and the applause echoed through the rafters. But when Autumn got up to the mic, the cacophony went away like smoke. She cleared her throat and spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough that everyone could hear. "People want to know if I'm angry, bitter, or sorry for what it cost." She stopped and looked around the room. "I'm not. Every time someone looked at me like I didn't belong, I remembered who I was. Every time they tried to erase me, I wrote my name in truth. And when they poured oil on me, thinking it would silence me forever, I learned something." Her voice got stronger. "You can hurt pride and skin, but you can't destroy the truth. A strong form of silence, the kind that is louder than thunder." Then she said softly, "My brother Elijah never got to tell his story. But through this trial, through this fight, he lives in every word I speak. This victory is for him and for everyone who has ever been ignored, dismissed, or silenced because of the color of their skin." She nodded, a modest but sure sign. Truth never burns. It rises. The audience stood up again. Some people cried, and some people saluted. Everyone remembered. The cameras clicked, and the headlines wrote themselves. Black Story. How Autumn Greer exposed the billionaire empire built on silence. If Autumn's story touched you, if her strength made you realize that you can still fight loud even when you're alone, don't just watch. Hit like, share this article, and sign up for Hidden Worth, where every voice matters and every truth should be heard. Because the most important stories are, they are the ones who won't die.